Welcome back to the Locked Room devlog, where I go through the late stage design of my game, the Locked Room Murder Mystery Game, coming to Kickstarter in January, I believe. Working on getting that date narrowed down so I can start telling people about it more specifically. But what I've done the past two videos is kind of go through my manuscript and pick out pieces that are working, that aren't working, rewrite bits, change bits, mark down things that I need to write. So we ended last week on the rot, which is like the weird secrets, the core secrets that everybody in the murder mystery story is holding. The rot is the the nastiness that's sort of draped over this social situation that led to a murder mystery worthy murder happening. And so I wanted to have a section that specifically calls that out and explains it. But it is also explained a bit in the section previously, so I need to work through that. That's probably not a camera thing. That's going to be a lot of muttering, which I know is what these videos are, just a lot of muttering, but that I think would be especially mutterous. So we're going to move on to peril, and peril is the stickiest point of the design for me at this stage because it is the most complicated thing in both the Ashcan version of this game and then also as I have progressed towards first edition. So let's walk through how it works, and I'll kind of explain how it works right now, and then I got to get that into writing. If I haven't already, I might have already. But yeah, peril. So we start with a quote here, trying to decide how much of this to do in this book, quotes from different murder mystery books. But in the meantime, I have them. So this is from Agatha Christie's Murder in Mesopotamia. It's Hercule Poirot speaking, where he says, "I joke, mademoiselle," he said, "and I laugh, but there are some things that are no joke. There are things that my profession has taught me, and one of these things, the most terrible thing, is this. Murder is a habit." So during the investigation, the killer does not rest. Each turn, it will land on a suspect and imperil them. This is represented... got a little dash in here. This is represented by the boxes on the right-hand side of each suspect card. Okay, no, it's not. This is represented by tokens that you'll place on the suspects and the answers that surround them. Place on suspects and the answers that surround them. So when the killer moves during the investigation, add a peril to the suspect it lands on by crossing off the bottommost empty box. So yeah, again, we're getting rid of that. And I can quickly, since I guess we just jump right into how this works, right? It's talking about boxes because in this version, when I had written that portion, the suspect card that'll go into the journal where you track all of the relevant characters had this sort of set of peril boxes, which I think I really like from a design perspective. It's nice to have it all in one space. But we'll get, and so adding a peril was just crossing off one of these boxes, and so you could easily count how many they had. But I'll get to in a second why I'm moving away from that, even if I do think it's a cleaner physical design. Yes. So when the killer moves during the investigation, add a peril to the suspect it lands on by okay. Add a peril to the suspect it lands on or to an answer adjacent to that suspect if they already have a peril. How can I word this? Because then we move on to say additional peril will put the suspect in harm's way unless... Okay. So when the killer moves during the investigation, add a peril to the suspect it lands on. And I think I can remove this paragraph break because additional peril will put the suspect in harm's way unless they're protected by answers. So this is the old way now. If there are now more peril tokens than 1 plus the number of answers bordering the suspect, a plot on that suspect's life is enacted. So I think you can immediately see why I'm changing that, because that sucks. It's just hard to explain. It's very simple once you understand what I'm trying to say, but it's very difficult to write out in a way that is both clear and doesn't just suck to read. So I had to change. I didn't have to, but I've decided to change the design. So when the killer moves during the investigation, add a peril to the suspect it lands on. Additional peril will put the suspect in harm's way unless they're protected by answers. If a suspect already has a peril token on its card, I think I have to get rid of this sentence. So add a peril to the suspect it lands on. If a suspect already has a peril token on its card, what do we say, their card, not its card, on their card, add a peril to a neighboring answer that doesn't yet have a peril. If there are no answers not, see, again, we're already getting into some shit. So the idea here, what I've changed is you add a peril. So we're going to use this skull as a peril to explain it. So you add a peril. The first peril goes on the suspect. That suspect has been imperiled in some way, conceptually. Then if the killer lands on them again, you add an additional peril to an answer. And if you watched the last video, in case you didn't watch it, internalize everything from the last video. Even if you watched it, you might not know what I'm talking about. But the answers are these sort of explanations that rest between the suspect and the neighboring clues. So the suspect, Celine, the neighboring clue is a folder that was surreptitiously passed to Celine's neighboring room. And then the answer that the detective found over the course of their investigation is that the folder contained details on the train heist that was being performed by Celine and company. So that answer, that knowledge being made aware to the detective, like being unearthed in the investigation, will protect Celine from additional threats by the murderer. The idea is that this sort of represents, there are so many times in murder mysteries where there are additional murders that aren't like the main murder. And it's always, I think it's like a core assumption of the genre that the additional murders are all done by the original person. And that very often they're done to try to get away with it, right? Like the first murder happened that was very meticulously planned, and then these additional plots happen to try to cover up the original one. So that is the idea. When the detective finds answers related to suspects, that suspect becomes a little bit more safer in the story. So if there are no answers, if all answers, okay. So I need a sentence, and this is where I'm getting tripped up, because I need a sentence that says, if there are no answers without a peril. So I just say that because it leaves some questions in the reader's mind, because you'll notice here, like, Celine is also next to this clue about Anna Mario learning about some of Celine's past and barging in, but there's no answer here. This is still an unanswered question that sits between this suspect and this clue. So this does not protect Celine. It can if the sleuth comes over and slams an answer down, but it currently doesn't. So I need a sentence that says, if all answers, if no answers, if none of the answers adjacent to the suspect can hold a peril token, a plot on that suspect's life is enacted. Okay, that is not bad. So now I can go up. This is represented by tokens that you'll place on suspects and the answers that surround them. Each suspect can hold one peril token, and each answer can hold one peril token. And then I can just put remember The borders between suspects and clues only become answers when the detective investigates them. Otherwise, they are just questions. And that might not be necessary, but I want to be more detailed here than not, and if I take it away later, that's fine. So remember, the borders between each suspect can hold one peril token, and each answer can hold each suspect and each answer can hold one peril token each. Remember, the borders between suspects and clues only become answers when the detective investigates them. Otherwise, they are just questions. When the killer moves during the investigation, add a peril to the suspect it lands on. If the suspect already has a peril token on their card, add a peril, and we can get rid of on their card. I think we've explained that enough. If the suspect already has a peril token, add a peril to a neighboring answer that doesn't yet have a peril. If none of the answers adjacent to the suspect can hold a peril token, a plot on that suspect's life is enacted. Great. You can decide that the plot succeeds and announce that the suspect is dead, or you can have them, another suspect, or our detective attempt to thwart the plot. Draw another card from the deck and add it to the tableau. If it matches the color of the card drawn for this turn, the plot is thwarted. Otherwise, the character dies. Either way, add the plot as an answer to one of that suspect's questions. Yes. Yes. I don't remember adding this, but I really like it. So the plot occurs, right? You draw a card. It's basically a 50-50 chance-ish. In a vacuum, it's a 50-50 chance, but obviously the deck will have been drawn a certain whatever. I don't need to get into that. If the card you draw matches the card you already drew on your turn, that suspect is safe. And if not, they die. But either way, you add a new answer. Like whatever happens, it's going to be informative and it's going to be related to one of these unanswered clues. So if Celine, who I think in this game was the murder victim, but whatever. But if Celine becomes the target of a plot, we will then decide, right, like that it relates to one of these three clues that have been uninvestigated. So maybe it has something to do with the fact that she choked David Devison in the bathroom with piano wire. Yikes. Yeah, perfect. Last thing, keep in mind that when you draw a card to thwart the plot, you might end the investigation entirely by drawing the final card of a full house. This would mean that the victim of our plot is the perpetrator of the whole crime. This is a thing that can happen. Yeah, maybe they were staging something, It's just sort of an edge case that I feel like it's good to call out because that plays into the stakes of not just letting the plot succeed. Anyway. Cool. I think that's good, honestly. I think that is enough. Of course, I'll have like graphical depictions of what the hell I'm talking about, and that will really help. Yeah. Cool. I don't want to deal with this right now. This sidebar to try to explain the previous version, and it's still technically true, but I'm not going to think about it for the moment. Okay, the investigation. So we were just in this part with peril. I think these are the wrong headings, actually. These should all be heading 2 because they are part of this broader section called the Journal Part 2, which is the additional rules that get added for the investigation. Which maybe this could be here. More rules for your investigation. TK. Which I know I sort of reference here, but it might be just better to have it here, where it's like, okay, this is the next section. This is the Journal Part 2. We explained the Journal Part 1. We gave you all the rules that you needed then. Now we're moving to this investigation part. Here's some more rules. We're adding the sleuth. We are adding rot. We are adding peril. Cool. Now you've learned that. You're ready for the investigation. The investigation says, shuffle the tableau back into the deck. Place the sleuth on a question next to the suspect that found the victim. We will resume turn order. Why is Google not like... No, that's fine. We will resume turn order to write more chapters. Each chapter leads to an answer, which will be marked by writing the detail. Writing... Why don't we just get rid of the subject of that sentence? Which will be marked by writing on the corresponding border of the clue card being investigated. This ends once there's one last full house in the tableau, when the suspect currently occupied by the killer is revealed as the culprit. Yes, writing investigation chapter, draw a card. I think that's all fine. Draw a card and add it to the tableau. If you now have a full house, move to the summation. Otherwise, move the killer following the same rules as before. Add peril as described. Well, I'll worry about that, but like, as described on the previous page, might not be true with whatever the new layout is. We'll see. If adding the peril... Okay, maybe I shouldn't. Just we'll see it, because what if I forget? Peril. TK. If adding the peril led to a plot on the suspect, make sure to resolve the plot as described and incorporate its details into the rest of your turn. Move the sleuth a number of spaces equal to the drawn card's rank. Write a chapter where the detective turns the landed on question into an answer, taking into account the color of the drawn card. Red cards lead us to an answer about the rot, while black cards lead us to an answer on the murder. Keep in mind that we as players don't need to know what specifically the answer to the question is. It's enough to make a connection between the suspect and clue and flesh out some narrative details. We know that our brilliant detective is synthesizing all of these answers in their mind and will reveal all to us during the summation. And here I have in the sidebar, the journal is your record of the events and important characters, so don't be afraid to add to it, update suspects and clues with new information, and add new ones if the narrative has revealed some. All right, moving along into the summation. Yeah, the investigation like adds a bunch of these new rules, but it's still at its core the same exact game loop that you've been doing. There's just a couple more things going on the board, and you've got a different focus because your detective is sleuthing around. And finally, summation. The journal is officially complete. The detective has all the answers they need to reveal the truth to the world and put an end to our story. The suspect that the killer rests on is the culprit. They committed the grisly crime that our story revolves around, and their attempts to hide the truth have been for naught. The suit of the 3-card half of the full house will set the scene for the summation exercise. Use the table below and describe the situation our characters find themselves in, and then write the final chapter to connect all of the answers, to reveal the rot, and walk through how the crime was committed. This part... I don't think I love this part. It's the trying in the Ashcan. It sort of works, right? It's an extra thing that adds, but I think I don't know. Let me collect my thoughts on it. The idea of it is how does the detective break the truth to our suspects? Because there are so many different like sort of entertaining ways the sleuth does it. Sometimes they pull everybody into one room and walk through all of the details. Sometimes, it's these 4 things, right? Sometimes they trick the killer into revealing themselves, summon all involved to reveal their secrets, swoop in right as the wrong person is about to be accused, or stages an experiment to recreate every step of the murder. And I want to keep that list in the game. I just don't know that the game has to. The game spits out a lot of stuff at you, like who did it, who died the second time, all of these things get generated by the cards and the way the pieces move. I don't know if this needs to get generated. This might be just better as, like, consider how the detective breaks the truth to our suspects. Do they trick the killer into revealing themselves? Do they summon everyone involved? Yeah, I think I'm going to do it, because as I'm saying it out loud, I think it works. Consider for a moment how the detective will break the truth to our suspects. Do they trick the killer into revealing themselves? And inopportune moment? Do they summon everyone involved to a parlor and reveal all of their most guarded secrets? Do they swoop right in? Swoop in right as the wrong person is about to be officially accused of the crime? Do they stage an experiment to recreate every step of the murder? And then, yeah, I think we can just say, describe the situation our characters find themselves in and write the final chapter to connect all of the answers to reveal the rot and walk through how the crime was committed. The final chapters just says, the time for vague narrative beats is over. This is the scene where we learn the details and confront the hard truths. Each player should take a turn to state some cold, hard facts about the case, incorporating at least one answer from the journal. Turn order doesn't matter here, just make sure everyone gets a chance to contribute. We'll operate much like a writer's room in this stage, bouncing ideas back and forth to connect all of the dots and reveal the final truth of how the murder happened and what the rot at the core of it all really is. And then the sidebar in this, which I think is probably the most true thing about the design, is that this is the most difficult part of the game to structure from a rules perspective. The stories being played out in each individual game are so varied at this stage, so keep it loose and drive your story to its own satisfying conclusion. Right? There's so much of this game with the journal, with the killer piece bouncing around and telling you again who did it, when this happens, what characters should you involve in a scene, that you've made a lot, like that spits out a lot of cool story and cool circumstances, but when it comes time to tie it all together, like this stuff is effectively useless at tying it all together. It's just good. It's very good at giving you a pile of information and prompting you to generate a pile of information and clues and suspects and situations and messy business. But when it's finally like, okay, here's the answer, there's no game engine in the world that could actually get you to connect all of this random stuff that you generated, all of these scenes that you played out, and conclude it all at once. Only, frankly, like human creativity, especially group creativity, frankly, can pull all of that together in a way that makes everybody feel like they had a great time. So the game kind of like pulls back. It zooms out at this point, and yeah, that's good. And I do feel like it's good to make that explicit. Like maybe I can make that even more explicit than just have it in the sidebar. I'll have to think on that before I finalize it. But that's the idea. Is it's on you. You got to bring it. I got you here. I got you all the way. To almost the end, and I'm even telling you when it ends, when it's time to wrap it up. But you got to wrap it up. That's all on you. And that's a lot of kind of design intent in just these little 2 paragraphs. Yes, very cool. That's the end, right? Other considerations, like there's going to be a bunch of stuff back here. So worksheet mode, I think I can get rid of, not get rid of this, but a lot of this is going to be different than it was in the ash can. So worksheet mode was like a little worksheet that I included. There will be a different worksheet, I'm sure. Role playing instead of dictating. By default, the chapters are summaries. Yeah. Other ways to lengthen your games. Books that inspired me. I started writing like a little essay on how I got into murder mysteries a year and a half ago. I'll continue that. Playing without a playset, using like the old rules for that. And then I've got a lot of optional rules as well that I want to add. So like, let's add one. Let's add one real quick. the table of contents, which I stripped out from the main game. What else is there? I have a list of this somewhere, so maybe that's a different video, is noodling on all of the optional rules that I'm going to throw in the end. So table of contents, imagining like a more noir-focused mode, where the whole thing is investigation, and maybe you even spit out who did it at the beginning, so you as players can drive towards that. I kind of want to add, I don't know, around the same time I read a bunch of the murder mysteries, I read The Talented Mr. Ripley, which is basically a reverse murder mystery where the main character is trying to get away with murder. I don't know if that's spoilers. It's like the core concept of the book, but it really takes a while to get there. Horrible guy. Yeah, I've got a bunch of these that I want to add. Just like optional rules, different thoughts, blah, 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 blah. Enjoy this game a lot. So there's just a lot of stuff that has flowed from my mind. But I think that'll do it. I mean, we made it through. This is very exciting for me to make it through the main text. Obviously, I left a few holes, left a few TK. I left 5 TKs. That's not too bad. Yes, 5. So I left 5 holes that I definitely need to deal with, and then there are definitely some other holes, but that's cool. We're all the way through it. That means I'm very close to getting out like a playtest copy, plain text, right? Like, here's the game, please play it. If you want to play it with me, shout, we'll play it. Here's the play sets that I have ready. Let me know what you think about them. That kind of stuff is all coming soon. I think that's like my deadline is the end of this month, so that December I can do a ton of playtesting. Into January I can do a ton of playtesting, depending on when I'm running the Kickstarter, of course. If that's mid-January like I'm thinking, or if I push it into February, I don't know. We're gonna figure it all out. And you're gonna learn about it either here or in the publishing a tabletop RPG series, depending on how much game design is going on. But until then, thanks for swinging by. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you later.